Bloomberg Audio Studios.
Podcasts, radio, news.
I sold diapers.com to Amazon, and I made generational wealth because nobody in my family ever made money before, but I was depressed. And my co-founder at the time, Vinny Barrar, we basically both felt the same way. And after the money was wired to our bank account, we sort of said, like, we should be celebrating right now. And we were both like depressed, and we went and we had a drink, and we're just like, man, like, it just goes to show you it wasn't about the money. Like, the mission that we had set out was kind of like crushed.
Alex, I feel like this is a very special episode of The Deal in the sense that we're bringing your business partner in for a different kind of conversation. Marc Lore, who is he to you?
Well, he's one of my best friends. He's one of my most important partners. He is a mentor, someone who I look up to, someone who we learn a lot from each other. And quite honestly, it's been a great partnership because we have complementary set of skills.
What I think about is this entrepreneur who keeps finding these new ways to win. So you think about selling diapers.com, that was a real company, to Amazon for more than $500 million. That actually is an acquisition that he's not so happy with. So he goes and does it again. He creates jet.com, sells that to Walmart. And as you say, from deck to exit in 26 months, $3+ billion. What?
Unbelievable.
And now he's on to the next thing, Wonder. He talks a lot about that. Big takeaway for me is his willingness to just either make a mistake or change his mind. You see it, I would imagine, almost every day talking to him.
He is truly a phenomenal talent. He talks about 6 gear, which means working 100 hours a week, 20 hours a day. He has an incredible engine. And this is his baby, Wonder. He's raised over $1 billion. He just finished a $700 million raise. The company just got appraised at $3.5 billion.
I don't know if we have spent as much time with anyone yet talking so in depth and in such a nuanced way about entrepreneurship and the mechanics of it. It's just fascinating to hear someone who can talk so eloquently about what seem to be soft things in very hard terms. On this episode of The Deal, Marc Lore. So, Marc, introduce yourself.
I'm Marc Lore. I'm the founder and CEO of Wonder Group and co-owner with Alex of the Minnesota Timberwolves and Lynx.
So we should say this is a little bit of a different episode of The Deal, but I think that's the best place to, how do you guys come together? How does this all happen that these two guys are in business together? I'm going to start with you.
Full disclosure, Marc and I are partners in several businesses, including the Timberwolves and the Lynx, as he said. But how we came together was actually funny. It was around COVID. And we had a mutual friend that kept telling me, you have to meet this Walmart guy. And I was like, well, I'm really busy with the Mets now. But I wasn't expecting to meet Marc. And we kind of hit it off right away. We're both New Yorkers. We both have 2 daughters. We both come from humble beginnings. And I was like, wow, I don't know what this meeting is about, but I want to do something with Marc. And that's kind of how it started.
What do you remember about that?
I remember being a big Yankees fan growing up, a New Yorker, heard things about Alex before we met. And when we actually met on Zoom the first time, I was just a little bit surprised at how down to earth he was, how we shared a common set of values. And he was different than I think the perception of him in the world with me and others. And we just really hit it off.
Alex and I have had this interview circled on the calendar for a long time because from my perspective, from where I sit, this is one of the most fascinating partnerships, especially when it comes to sports. So let's talk about that because, as you mentioned, you're in the midst of the Mets deal when you guys meet. And that, I believe, creates this catalyst for you guys to really come together. What was it about sports that appealed to you, Marc?
For me, I don't know. It wasn't like, I see a business opportunity to go after. It was driven by a passion for sports. I think Alex and I share this, though, but we went to Minnesota and originally met with Glenn and Becky, and they shared sort of the 30-year history of the team and how the city was sort of down on it. There's some events that happened in Minnesota, and it just, sports have the ability to make people happy and inspire people and things. And we're both like this underdog. We like the underdog. We feel like we're underdogs. And we kind of just felt this like story in Minnesota of the underdog. And I think we just had this drive to say, man, let's get in there and really let's like put our energy into this, and let's like help turn this thing around. And if we do that, we could add a lot of collective happiness in the city, the fans, players. Like there was some drive for me. I don't know if you felt the same way, but it was like the money was second. It was like, okay, and like NBA is a great league. It's growing. It's progressive. These team valuations have been going up. It's going to be a good investment. But it wasn't like we're just searching like a PE firm or something, searching for some good investment.
Interesting.
It was really the story and the history of Minnesota that really was inspiring.
That gives me an opportunity to ask a question that I've asked Alex before, but I really want to ask the two of you together, which is kind of getting into this partnership, because I would say I know a lot about him. I know a little bit about you, but like, how does it work?
I'll go first, because I think this will give you an example as I pull the curtain back on our early days. I hope you don't mind me sharing some finances, but I'll do it anyways. So within the first 10 days of Marc and I getting to know each other, it went from, wow, okay, like we're in the middle of COVID. I'm in the middle of the Mets and pursuing that acquisition. In the first 10 days, Marc sent over his finances, like just a sheet, like his whole balance sheet. I was like, okay, that was quick. Like no NDA, I mean, just send it to me. I was like, okay, this is aggressive.
That's quite an attachment.
Yeah,
to get
I mean,
your
that's like
Click.
First date, boom. And then the second thing he did, he said, hey, I like this. I like the way we're jiving here. I'm in for $25 million. I'm like, wow, okay, finances, $25 million. Within 10 days, he was so invested. He's like, I'm good for 200. Let's go. And I was like, okay, this is my kind of partner. I mean, but it was example of him trusting his gut, him being a New Yorker. We both loved the Mets. We thought it was an incredible opportunity. I would say not the greatest business opportunity, but an opportunity where we can exercise our passion, what we can do for the city. We're talking about how can we impact young kids around math. Obviously, he's a math guy. I'm a baseball guy. So that's how we started. And I very quickly found out I wanted to do things with Marc outside of the Mets and other things, and I can learn a lot from him. I thought our skills were very complementary to each other.
What did you see in him?
I think I was really impressed with Alex's intellect and empathy. I think we share a lot of the same core values. I think that struck me. I think Alex is very trusting. I think we know with trust comes some great things, but there's also downside to it. And I think we're both similar in accepting the downside. Sometimes you're overly trusting, you get burned. That's kind of a byproduct, but there's something magical that happens when you trust. I think we are both like loyal. I think that's important. I think we're both missionary, not mercenary. It's not about like every dollar, every penny, like striking a deal. We deal make the same way. I think when we did the deal with Glenn and Becky, it was very much like just kind of tell us what you want and we're good. We didn't have to like squeeze or anything. And then I think even when we operate on a day-to-day basis, we do a lot of stuff, handshake. There's no like things that we're signing together. It's very, very trusting. So that builds a bond. I think Alex is also incredibly knowledgeable, obviously in sports. And yes, the business of sports, but more just he's been in and knows what it's like to be a player at the most elite level. And it's been super helpful, I think, with helping to mentor the players on the Wolves, understand what it means to create a great culture.
And so are you guys like texting all day? Like, do you call each other? Like, what does this relationship look like?
Yeah, a lot. I mean, sometimes we talk 5 or 6 times a day. I mean, that's been the average lately. But, you know, even with Glenn and Becky, the experience was so good when we went down to Naples and Minnesota. We did not negotiate. He set the terms, price, we did it, and we got in. And in all the conversations we've had around the Timberwolves, I don't think we've ever talked about revenues. It's really been about how do we make it better.
Inputs versus outputs.
Exactly.
Say more about that.
Inputs versus outputs. You know, like in a company, you could either be focused on what is the revenue, what is the profit. Those are like output numbers.
Yeah.
I care less about that. I care more about the inputs that will lead to good outputs in the future. So making sure, because you can get good outputs with bad inputs.
So you're talking
That's
about
not
like
sustainable.
the right hires, the right investments, the right.
I think in order to create a sustainable culture of winning and eventually profit over a long sustained period of time, you have to make the right investments in the inputs that will lead to the outputs, maybe not today because it's an investment, but 5 or 10 or 20 years down the road.
So let's go back as we go through your business life. As we were researching this, and obviously Alex knows so much about you already, and I've gotten a chance to talk to you a few times, but if you type in diapers.com or jet.com into Google, they lead you just to some interesting places. They led you to some interesting places too. So take us into your life as an entrepreneur. Diapers.com, just let's start there.
I have to say though, I was born an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
When I was 4 years old, the teacher said, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" And I said, "I want to be a farmer." And she was like, "Farmer? Why farmer?" And I said, "Because they grow stuff from nothing." And that was sort of just the way I was sort of like born into the world. I loved the idea of growing stuff from nothing. As a kid, I didn't know anything other than farmer, grow stuff from nothing. Didn't know about startups and things like that. And my parents had me when they were 20 years old. So I spent a lot of time with my grandmother and grandfather. And so I came home. I was the first person in my family ever to go to college. Mm-hmm. So I came home with this crayon thing that said, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" And it said farmer. And I showed it to my grandmother and she says, "Farmer? No. Doctor or lawyer?" And I said, no, farmer, doctor or lawyer. And she was wanting me to be, the first professional in the family. And so I did every entrepreneurial business you could imagine as a kid: car wash, newspaper route, recycling, baseball cards, lemonade stands, like anything you could think of, it did. And just was born with this sort of drive to want to like work hard and build something. And
entrepreneurial in casinos as well.
Yeah, a little of that too. a little of that too. We used to go down to AC and sneak into the casino in high school, get all dressed up in like jacket and stuff like that, and see how long we could stay there before we got kicked out on age. But yeah, then I graduated in 93. It wasn't like you would just go work for a startup at that time. It was still kind of early days of tech. And so I went to work at a bank. Started out in Bankers Trust and then Credit Suisse First Boston, Sanwa Bank. So I was in financial risk management there. And one day, this is in the like late 90s, tech is booming.
Yeah.
And everyone's talking about is these like hot startups, tech companies and things. And I'd save a decent amount of money. And I just one day said, that's it. I'm going to be an entrepreneur. I woke up that morning and said, I'm going to do it. I walked into my boss's office and I said, I'm quitting to be an entrepreneur. And he's like, what? He's like, get out of here. Go back to the work. You know how much I'm paying you is what he said. And I'm like, no, I got to do this. He's like, all right, you must have a great idea. And I'm like, no, I just need to do this because I'm like all in kind of guy. Yeah. And like I was just doing banking so intensely. I couldn't like focus. So he said, you're serious? I said, yeah. He said, all right, well, I don't know what you're going to do, but like put me down for 50,000.
Wow.
So I got that $50,000 investment and I didn't know anyone else with money. So I said, well, now you're my investor. Do you have any other people that you could recommend? And he recommended a couple people. They recommended a couple people. I wind up raising money from 65 like angel investors with an average check size of like $80,000. So that was like the first business.
So Mark, going
this
back
was before diapers.
a little bit, this is in the early days. How old were you? And when he said he was paying you a lot of money, how much was he paying you?
Yeah, so I was 27 years old, $500,000 a year back then, which was big money.
Wow.
It was big money. I was executive.
I think it is big money.
You were one of the top earners in the floor.
I was executive vice president of the bank at 27.
Wow.
Funny story, but I went to see this guy, Jerry Goldstein, a couple of years later after I'd been out of there and doing my startup and had lunch with him. And he's like, I still can't believe you just quit on me and just did this entrepreneur thing, but it seems like it's working out great. He's like, how old are you now? You 35? I said, no, I'm like 29. And he said, that's impossible. And I said, what do you mean? He goes, well, then when I hired you to be the EVP, you were only 26 years old. That's impossible. I said, no, I was 26.
Yeah.
He said, yeah. guess the bald head threw me off.
This is like this is a huge breakthrough for the bald community.
It is.
This is amazing.
It's a shameless plug for you guys.
Yeah, exactly. We're doing great.
But Mark, one of the stories that it resonated so well with me is you're the ultimate missionary, not mercenary. You're all in. You talked about mission. But you said a story talking about baseball cards. You had a Reggie Jackson story. And I think this story, I think we were 10 or 11 years old.
Yeah.
Tell me that story because I think it tells me a lot about who you are and what you mean.
Yeah, that's still triggering to this day. So 5th grade, never forget it. It was a, baseball cards when you used to have to flip them heads or tails on the floor. There was this bully and it was a flipping for Reggie Jackson. And originally, I thought it was going to be whoever flip more heads wins Reggie Jackson. And he's like, no, you got to flip 10 heads in a row.
Wow.
And I was like, well, then I don't want to play. He's like, no, you're playing. You go. And I was like, and I flipped 10 heads in a row. And I was like, wow, I did it, even though he forced me into this. I got the Reggie Jackson and I was so happy. I'm walking away and he comes over and he punches me in the face, takes the Reggie Jackson. So I go and tell the teacher. Now I'm like 10 years old. I go tell the teacher and I say, hey, I won this Reggie Jackson and he punched me and took the card. And the teacher said, well, whose card is it? I said, well, it was his card, but then I won it. And she's like, well, if it was his card, then I'm sorry. And to this day, bullies are triggering. I ask like people on an interview, every interview, I ask them, what gets your blood boiling? What gets you just angry? So everyone's got that thing. And every once in a while, somebody will ask me, well, what gets your blood boiling? And it's always the bully.
Well, and to that point, I mean, you come up against, what's interesting is as an entrepreneur, you come up against, I'm not calling them bullies necessarily, but some of the biggest companies in the world as competitors. And so is what you just described fuel or is it motivation? Like how does that play in?
I can't even describe, and Alex and I talk about this, of what it feels like when you're up against a bully. It is, and I think Alex said this is okay if
whatever you want. I mean, let it rip. I mean, live TV.
Alex said it. He said, I don't like bullies either. He's like, I rather like lose everything I have than lose to a bully. I'll sleep under a freaking bridge. I don't care. And I'm like, that resonated with me. I'm like the same way. I'd rather lose every single penny and sleep under a bridge with Alex than lose to a bully. But if it's like, if somebody is reasonable on the other hand, they can get away with a lot with me. I'm very empathetic. I think Alex is very similar. That's why we kind of connected.
And fair.
And fair and like empathetic and sort of like if somebody comes up to you and says, hey, sorry, like, it's like, okay, like, it's okay. Mm-hmm. Like, even if they screwed you over or whatever, like, there's empathy there. But if you're going to just play the bully all the way through, no, it's
So Mark, that's one of the things, Jason, I don't know if you know this, but this is one of the most incredible things about Mark, besides him being a great business person and a father and all of that, and a great friend. How have you been one of the most highest paid CEOs of all time at Walmart, e-commerce? You grew that business from $8 billion to $50 billion. You've done all these great things. How in 30 plus years haven't you sued anyone and never been sued?
Yeah.
Now that is a feat on its own.
Yeah.
How?
Again, so it comes to the fairness thing. I can see somebody's point of view. So if somebody even is the least bit reasonable, then there's always a resolution, right? And don't have the ego to say, and I think it's the opposite of my dad. So I learned this from my dad. My dad was the kind of guy that like, if he thought you were trying to like negotiate too hard, he would just on principle refuse to negotiate. So like I kind of learned that and like saw the turmoil that causes when you dig your heels in on principle and ego, as opposed to like, just check the ego. It doesn't matter. If you're going to be reasonable, we'll debate it and I'll listen. And there's got to be a resolution because you feel that way for a reason. And I think that's always been the case is that people, I think when you be vulnerable, people be vulnerable back, you let down your guard, you talk it through, and people generally, I think, want a good thing.
Stitch that together for us with, that is a very like humane and empathetic approach to business. Being an entrepreneur is hard and starting something is hard. And so take us back, you make that huge decision, you go in, you quit your $500,000 a year job, you start a company, then you eventually start diapers.com. Like what's the journey briefly that gets you from I'm working on Wall Street to I'm selling stuff online.
I mean, it started very simply. I think I always tell people the idea is usually not the thing that decides whether it works or doesn't work. It all comes down to execution and people, and bad ideas can work and good ideas could fail. And the idea was quite simple. People weren't really able to buy diapers online at normal, like Walmart, Target prices. It just didn't exist. If you went on Amazon, which was one of the only places selling diapers, they were $10 more in Amazon than they were in Walmart, for example. And it just seemed strange to me. I'm like, it's kind of a pain. You have babies, you got to go out to the store, you come back. Why is it so expensive? And I think in the early days of e-commerce, they just marked up a box of diapers because they're heavy and it costs a lot to ship. And that was kind of like just like the very simple approach. And the thinking at the time was, well, why are diapers in Walmart and Target a loss leader? Why do they not make any money on diapers? And people in retail, because I didn't know retail at the time, said, well, that's because they drive people into the store. They have to get diapers. And when they come in for the diapers, they buy everything else. So I thought that's interesting. So if they can be a loss leader for brick and mortar, why couldn't they be a loss leader online? Now the loss, albeit, was a lot larger because you had to pay for shipping.
Right.
But you also had a lot more products online than in the store. So it's the same thing. If I can lose $1 and go into Walmart and make $2, great. If I lose $10 online on a box of diapers and make $20, sort of the same math, right? And so that was the big vision is let's sell diapers, deliver them overnight at Walmart prices, build a relationship with parents, and then sell them everything else.
I mean, on that point of entrepreneurship, I mean, you talk about this a lot and this notion that the struggle's real and you embrace it in a lot of ways. And how does that come up as you mentor people?
I always tell people see like the success to say, oh, you had one successful, I get 2, 3, and now it's wonders working again. Like you make it look easy, and it's anything but easy. I just want people to know, like, I feel like I'm eating glass every day and just hoping that I don't get cut on the way down. Like every day, that's what it feels like. And it's the entrepreneurs that don't get down on themselves and think I'm a failure. What am I even doing this for? I could be doing other things. Like once your brain goes there, you're done. Like it requires being an entrepreneur you're gonna face really tough times. And it's those that go into what I call the 6th gear, where you literally give it every ounce of energy you've got. It's more than 100 hours a week. Your brain is focused and dialed in on exactly what you need to do. And you couple that with the ability to take risk and try things and move very, very, very quickly and be comfortable with uncertainty. If you've got those attributes as an entrepreneur, you're going to be okay. You're going to figure it out. But it's not easy. It's really, really hard and tiring. And I take a lot of pride in being more on the empathetic side of being a leader, because I think at the end of the day, you can only do so much as an individual. It's about the team. And you have to create the right culture. Culture in a startup is not ping pong tables and stuff like that. It really is about how you treat people and the value system of the organization. That's one part of a framework that I've created called VCP, Vision Capital People. And I think as a startup founder, you need to focus the vast majority, if not all your time, thinking about VCP, vision, capital, and people.
I want to frame this in the context of Wonder because it's such an interesting company. So what does that vision say for Wonder?
So the vision says we want to create the super app for mealtime. Anytime somebody wants to eat a meal, breakfast, lunch, or dinner, they'd be able to go to the Wonder app, and whether it be food delivered hot to their door, whether it be a Blue Apron meal kit, whether it be an oven-ready meal, eventually in the future, groceries with recipes, it could be booking a reservation to a restaurant even. Like anytime you want to eat, you pull up the app. And then in the future, when we are covering all of your meal occasions, we can track your health, calories, fat, protein, vitamins. We can give you a health score. We can use AI to meal plan based on a budget and how your lifestyle, how you operate. Some days, Friday, Saturday, you want food delivered to your door. You don't want to do anything. Sometimes Wednesday, Thursday, it's an oven-ready meal. You just throw it in the oven. On Monday, you're willing to do some cooking and make it fun and get a meal kit delivered. So that's really the big vision for Wonder.
So tonight, I'm in the Upper West Side. I want to have dinner. If I go to the Wonder app, how many restaurants and how quickly would dinner get to my house?
So right now, we've got 25 restaurants live on the Upper West Side on the Wonder app, and you can order from all the restaurants in a single delivery and a single checkout. So everybody in the family can order from a different restaurant. All the food will be cooked and delivered with our own delivery network in under 30 minutes. And the food's going to come hot because we won't deliver more than 6 minutes. And so from the time it leaves the kitchen till the time it gets to your door is maximum 6 minutes in the Upper West Side. So the food's coming hot, it's great quality, you get multi-restaurant ordering, it's on time, it's accurate. So there's a lot of benefits of vertical integration.
What kind of feedback have you got from some of the consumers that have tasted?
Yeah, I mean, we have some of the best chefs in the world on the platform. Jose Andres, Bobby Flay, Marcus Samuelson, JJ Johnson, Mark Murphy. We've got Nancy Silverton. We've got a great group of chefs. The chefs are, I think, really love Wonder, and the customers do as well. So we get really, really high marks from customers and the overall experience.
Before we get too far into the current, go a little bit back to the past, because it feels like so much of what you're doing with Wonder, what you guys are doing as investors, really does come from those early entrepreneurial days, because you're going up against massive companies. Like, what are the lessons that you take from competing with Amazon, for instance?
I think the ability to take risk and understand where you are on the risk spectrum. So the lower the probability of success, the more risk you need to take.
Right.
When you have a high probability of success, you take less risk. That's why a big company, they're not taking legal risk or any kind of risk like that. Why? Things are working. It's good. When you're a startup in your early stages and you talk to a lawyer, they shouldn't be giving you the same advice about whether you should do something or not do something when you're a startup versus a big company. But lawyers tend to give you the same advice. It is what it is. You as an entrepreneur need to be able to understand that the biggest risk you take as a startup is you're going to run out of money and die. People often underestimate the risk of the status quo, and they overestimate the risk of change. And entrepreneur has to be the opposite.
Do you remember a time when you had to take a bigger risk than maybe you were comfortable with?
Well, I'll tell you one is an easy example. 2 years ago, we had 450 trucks on the road, and we had tested a brick and mortar, and the brick and mortar was doing really well and felt like that was the future of the company. Better return on capital, more profitable, more scalable. But we only had one brick and mortar. It was tested for a month. We had 450 trucks on the road that were working really well, and customers loved it. Investors, press, employees, everybody loved the trucks. But you have to acknowledge and be completely objective and say, okay, it's still a startup. What's the probability you continue with the truck business? And then you got to always be objective and looking for opportunities to take risk to increase the probability of success. And when I saw that brick and mortar, I said, that's it. That's going to improve the probability of getting a big outcome. The big outcome meaning much more scalable.
Got it.
Much higher return on capital,
Right.
More profitable. And so just felt like that was the right. But still, in that position, if you're in a big company, do you literally tell employees, press, shareholders, these trucks that have been working that we've been talking about for 3 years, we're going to stop it, take revenue to zero, sell the trucks, and start over with this brick and mortar based on 1 month's worth of experience. That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And now when I did it, people said, that's crazy. And now today, fast forward, we're 16 months removed from that. People are saying, I can't imagine us not being in the brick and mortar business
Right.
and being in the truck business still. So as an entrepreneur, the key learning there is being really objective and thinking the trucks are working and thinking, oh, we're great. Don't take that risk. Things are good. When things are good in a startup, you still have an 80% chance of dying, right? Like that's just the nature of a startup, right? And so you have to you have to understand what you're dealing with and factor that into your decision making. That is really, really important. And it's the objectivity.
Coming up, Marc discusses selling the companies that made him famous as an entrepreneur and what he learned working inside Walmart and Amazon.
And Marc, I've heard you say, putting the cart in front of the horse. Talk to me a little bit about that.
As an entrepreneur, you've heard the phrase, don't put the cart in front of the horse. And I think people sort of trained to think that way, like don't get ahead of yourself. I think as an entrepreneur in the early days, because the risk of it not working is so high or the risk of it working is so low, that there's a benefit to putting the cart in front of the horse to sort of like flush things out faster and get the answer faster than you ordinarily would. So for example, when I was actually at the bank, I started this financial risk management certification exam, the FRM, with my colleague Lev. And I was 24 years old. There was no certification exam for financial risk managers like a CPA and things. And I just thought like, hey, like let's create a certification exam. And friends would say, well, you can't do, who's going to take your exam? Like you're a 24-year-old kid. They're not going to take your exam. So I said, all right, good point. So we created like the Global Association of Risk Professionals. It was an association. We said, well, the association will give the exam. They said, yeah, but you just created that. So how does that work? So I said, good point. Okay. So this is putting the cart in front of the horse rather than like go through this whole like build an examination, bring in professors, all the things that you would need to do. You basically just put on the website in one weekend, here are all the topics. Here are some books to read. The exam is in May in New York City, and it's $550 if you want to sit for the exam. That was it. One weekend. Put the cart in front of the horse. Started getting checks. 1 check, 2 checks, 3 checks. I think it was 34 checks that we got the first year. So we said, all right, I guess we gotta create this examination. Then you get
where's that horse now?
Then you get the professors. Then you put the exam together. Then you administer it, and then you do it. And so that's just a great example of like you don't know until you do it. So how do you take the biggest step you can take with the minimum amount of effort and time to kind of flush out the answer as quickly as possible? So that's the technique that's to start a whole company, but inside of a startup, inside of a big company, there are lots of opportunities to sort of like very quickly put the cart in front of the horse to learn something that could dictate the future strategy of the organization. And so that's a good lesson there.
So with the sale of diapers.com, it goes to Amazon. That's a story in and of itself. Some people, having gone through that successfully, would be like, yeah, entrepreneurship, done it. Maybe I'll go do something else. What was your mindset as an entrepreneur? What did you learn? What had you learned at that point, I guess, that sort of fueled you and about the role of an entrepreneur?
I sold diapers.com to Amazon, and I made generational wealth because I had nobody in my family ever made money before, but I was depressed. And my co-founder at the time, Vinny Barrar, we basically both felt the same way. And after the money was wired to our bank account, we sort of said like, we should be celebrating right now. And we were both like depressed, and we went and we had a drink, and we're just like, man, like it just goes to show you it wasn't about the money. Like the mission that we had set out was kind of like crushed with the sale to Amazon. And we had just really big dreams for what that could be. And it was kind of over. Even though it was a great exit, we made a lot of money and shareholders made a lot of money, it was depressing. And so I felt like, there was just some unfinished business in e-commerce. We had learned so much, had new, great, talented people, had access to capital, and went after it with Jet again. And I think one of the reasons why I think we were able to grow so fast and have all this happen in 26-month period was because we kind of felt behind. It was like diapers would have been here by now had we just stuck with it. And so there's a little bit of catch up. I kind of regret kind of going as fast as we did on Jet, because I think some of the core principles that I have around entrepreneurship were sort of broken during that run. But again, it was a successful exit for shareholders, for employees, and for Walmart.
So Marc, I want to go back to jet.com. You went from deck to exit in about 26 months. That's incredible. There was some articles around the time that they may have overpaid. But as somebody said from inside the company, it's one of the greatest acquisitions that Walmart made, because along with Jet came Marc Lore. And they wanted to kind of turbocharge their e-commerce business. They were doing around $8 billion a year, which was pretty pedestrian for that. and you took it with your team to about 50 billion in like 4 years. How hard was that, and how the heck did you do that?
We had a great team at Jet that really helped. Once I came into Walmart and just assessed the situation, was we needed to change the narrative. I think the narrative around Walmart e-com was they were losing big time to Amazon. I think as a result, it was challenging for Walmart to recruit great people into e-commerce business. I think Walmart had great people on the store side of the business, a very big, profitable business. But on the e-com side, Walmart wasn't known as a tech company. I probably made a series of decisions that any one decision on its own, if you just isolated and studied it, would have been a bad decision. But the sum total of a bunch of bad decisions actually turned out to be a really good decision. One bad decision would be, we had the cost to acquire a customer and the lifetime value. And typically you want to have the lifetime value of a customer, some multiple of what it costs to acquire, so that you pay to acquire and then you make a return and it makes sense. Well, they didn't have a very high lifetime value of a customer. And so the CAC, cost to acquire a customer, in the LTV, was sort of upside down. You wouldn't typically recommend spending marketing into an upside down scenario. But my view was we need to get top line moving. And so the first year we grew, I think, again, spending marketing, I would say inefficiently, not something that on an isolated decision I would recommend, but getting that business growing. And people were like, wow, like what's going on over at Walmart e-commerce, and some tech folks, they're investing, the sales are growing. So a series of decisions like that that helped change the narrative, because at the end of the day, I knew we had to have a clear vision as VCP. We had the capital from Walmart. What we didn't have was the people. And so how do we change the narrative to bring in the very best people in the world? And I think we were able to bring in some amazing people that really helped transform the business. So I was sort of helped be the catalyst to it, but it was the great people we hired that ultimately executed and grew that business.
And what is it like for someone who thinks so much about entrepreneurism and startups to be in, talk about the belly of the beast. You're in literally one of the largest companies in the world. How do you create a playbook that is both true to you and successful inside this massive organization?
Yeah, I was fortunate that Doug McMillan and the board at Walmart sort of said, here are the keys. We need help on e-com. And sort of, they definitely let me run the first couple of years to kind of get a lot of these things in motion. I think maybe they wish that things happened faster than they did, but it was tough to turn over that team and culture and get that moving. But I think in order to be successful there, you have to be a sort of missionary. And just like when we sold the company, I just felt like I was in service to Doug and the board, and I was going to do whatever I could to do what's in the best interest of Walmart. It wasn't about me. It wasn't about the team. It wasn't about Jet. One of the first decisions I made was to merge Jet and Walmart into one e-commerce site. It didn't make sense to have two. That, of course, didn't want to see my baby get merged in, but that was the right decision. So I think if you go into a big company like that and you approach it with this idea that like whatever's in the best interest of the company, they acquired us, and you put all your thought and effort into that, then good things will happen.
And Mark, just one simple question. For me, it's always intriguing. When you build a company from deck to exit in 26 months, how does Walmart get a hold of Mark? Do you get an investment banker and says, hey, Walmart's interested or Amazon's interested? How does that work?
Both Amazon sale and the Walmart sale, no banker.
Wow.
So it was just direct relationship to start off as like, hey, meet each other. And then, I think when I met Doug, I really liked him, and he wanted to get e-commerce moving and go after Amazon, and I did too. And so we just sort of bonded over that. And when we were talking,
you had you had a common foe in Amazon. Fair?
That's fair. That's fair.
Because your experience with Amazon, they bought you and shut it down?
I didn't have the best experience selling diapers.com to Amazon.
Yeah.
A much better experience selling Jet to Walmart. That's for sure. Learned a lot of lessons in both cases.
What was the main lesson you took from Amazon, from the Amazon acquisition to the Walmart acquisition?
Well, it's interesting. This is more nuanced, but it's really important to me is, I didn't like the Amazon culture. Like it wasn't a good fit for me. one of the things I came to appreciate about Amazon and about culture in general is the most important thing is consistency, hiring people that excel in that culture. Like that's the most important. And Amazon was really good at that. So they knew exactly, this is our culture. These are the kind of people that are successful, and they weed out people that aren't, and they find the people that are. And so even though I disagreed with the culture, it actually was a good culture. One of the big things was, and they were not afraid to say this, and that's what I respect it. They don't like social cohesion. They think you should be very direct and tell somebody, if you don't like that, just tell them right to their face, I don't like that. That's bad. And I'm a little bit more like social cohesion, empathy. I would never tell somebody straight like that. I would do it in a much nicer way. They say, no, that takes too much time. It causes groupthink. It's a waste of time. Get to the answer, get to the point. Some people love that. Some people operate. They say, just tell me. I don't care. Don't beat around the bush. Don't sugarcoat it. I like to sugarcoat things because I think people are human. They have emotions. And again, I'm trying to get the very best out of people. And my view is if people feel respected, they feel you're not being condescending, not treating them bad, that they're going to develop a loyalty, and there's a trust that develops. And from that trust and loyalty comes that fire to want to like be a missionary and want to like help push the company forward. And that's what I'm looking for.
Marc, you and I talk about trust, and I've learned this from you. Talk a little bit about your philosophy about trust and how you usually get more trust from people that work with you or for you by trusting more.
It's just starting from a place of trust until they do something to lose that trust.
Yeah.
But the three core values at Wonder and at Jet, at trust, transparency, and fairness. And I truly believe that if people feel trusted and you're transparent with information, not the sort of you're bad, it's here's all the information. Here are the financials. Here's the state of the company. Here's where we are. Here's our compensation system. Here's what everybody makes in the company. Be super transparent, and they have that information, and you're fair and equitable, and you create a safe working environment. If you have that set of values, then I think people find it very empowering, and that's how you get the best out of people in my view. And so always look to create that sort of empowering culture.
So Marc Lore, what advice would you give a 10-year-old, a 20-year-old, a teenager that wants to be the next Marc Lore? What advice would you give them?
I get this question a lot, and people say, if you had to do it over again, what would you do? I get really lucky, but I think I've noticed that I have two daughters, 24 and 21 years old, and so they're asking me for advice a lot. And I think people at that age, in their teens or 20s, they feel like they need to have it all figured out. What do I need to do? It's very mechanical. Do I need to like get this degree to then do that, to then do this, and do I do this and that? And what I would say to everyone at that age is it's important that you just focus on learning as much as you can, finding mentors or people that have been successful, that you respect in terms of their values. You'll learn a lot about leadership, a lot about people, lessons that you don't even realize you're learning just through osmosis of being around the person that'll pay huge dividends in the future. So I think learning is really important. I think also following your passion. So like when my daughters ask me like, I don't know what to do. Should I do this? Should I? It's like, what do you want to do? What's going to make you happy? Like this month, next month. And like, yeah, but I want to do this. This would make me happy, but then I won't be able to get here or get there. And I just sort of disagree with that philosophy. I think follow your passion. If you've got a drive, something burning inside you that you want to go do or learn about, like the time to do it is when you're young. And that'll take you places that you have no idea and can't plan out. But I do know if you follow your passion, you surround yourself with great people, you learn and you give more than you take, and give without any regard for what you might get in the future. And if you come from that place of giving, surround yourself with great people, learn and follow your passion, I think magical things will happen.
Great. Marc, thank you so much.
Thank you, Marc.
Thank you.
The Deal is a production from Bloomberg Podcasts and Bloomberg Originals. The Deal is hosted by Alex Rodriguez and Jason Kelly. Our producers are Victor Yvez and Lizzie Phillip. Our story editor is Siddhartha Mahanta. Our assistant producers are Stacey Wong and Cale Brooks. Blake Maples is our sound engineer. Rubab Shakir is our creative director. Art direction is from Jacqueline Kessler. Original music by Blake Maples. Casting by Dave Warren. Our managing editor is David Ravella. Our executive producers are Sage Bauman, Jason Kelly, Adam Comiskey, Brendan Newnham, Kelly LaFerriere, Ashley Honig, Trey Shallowhorn, Kyle Kramer, and Andrew Barden. Additional support from Rachel Scarmuzino, Elena Sasangelis, and Anna Mazarakis. Joshua DeVoe is our director of photography. Camera operation by Jesse Rindner, Billy Voyerman, and Natasha Abelard. Our gaffer is Rob Silcox, and our grip is Pranoy Jacob. Our production assistant is Diana Colung. Katia Vinoy is our video editor. You can also watch The Deal on Bloomberg Originals, YouTube, and Bloomberg Television. Subscribe to The Deal wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks so much for listening.